you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Never tell me the odds.
The greatest idea in human history, the theory of evolution by natural selection.
You must unlearn what you have learned.
As a mate with destiny. In order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive.
We're living in captivity, and it's time to break free.
Welcome to A Wilder Life with Eric Edmeades. Hey everybody, Eric Edmeades here with another episode of A Wilder Life, and I am really excited to bring you guys Josh Bowmar. Josh Bowmar is, first of all, a bow hunter who's done some pretty fantastic things around the world, garnered himself a huge following, millions of people, and started some really great and successful businesses around nutrition and bow hunting. As you can imagine, we're probably going to have some pretty fascinating conversations, and I just want to say, Josh, it's a real honor to have you here, and let's dive in.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to be here. I appreciate you having me on. Anytime we can talk about fitness and hunting, especially bow hunting, I'm going to be all in on the conversation.
All good. Now I'm going to give you a little history on me on hunting because, of course, hunting's controversial, right?
Sure.
And
I've been the center of that for many times. So
I can imagine.
I get
and
it.
I'm aware. My sort of background in conservation starts when my mother's grandfather proposes the formation of the Sabi Reserve, which of course becomes the Kruger National Park. And I don't know if you know this, but when they first started it, it was called a game reserve because it was about reserving hunting game. And so they went in there and obliterated wild dogs and lions and leopards and cheetahs because they thought of it as a game reserve.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, fascinating. And then as they caught on,
I didn't know that actually.
Yeah. And as they caught on and began to realize maybe predators had a role and they started making it more a nature reserve, then there was a train that ran through the park and it ran through the park at night as part of a go up to Vic Falls and all that kind of stuff. And they went to the train company and said, look, could you switch your schedule? I think people would love to go through the Kruger Park in the day where they could see the animals. And the train company came back and said, can they shoot from the train?
Oh my gosh. That's how it started. That is insane.
Can you shoot from the train? Of course not. They literally just wanted to shoot and leave the animal. Anyway, so wow. That's my sort of introduction to hunting. So I start off as I'm against hunting because what I'm doing is I'm categorizing all hunting as that type of thing.
Absolutely. And
then, of course, I come full circle because, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, but when we consider Tanzania and Kenya comes along and bans all the hunting. And of course, their wildlife has been obliterated since, whereas Tanzania said, hey, we're going to allow hunting in our country ethically and in conservation guidelines. And they have a thriving animal population there. And so that's what sort of swung me around, as well, of course, as spending the last 15 years visiting the Hadza people who are, you might be professional, but I would argue they are professional.
Yes. We could dive into this and go into so much depth. Seriously. Oh my gosh. And I just don't know how deep you want to dive right into this because as for the conservation side of things, I have so much to say because we've spent well over 6 months in Africa and we go months at a time to Tanzania. We work with the anti-poaching teams. We see the effects of non-hunting areas. And my God, Kenya conversation Kenya used to be the Mecca for hunting. And I mean, it was
the Mecca best. For safari.
And amazing. And then we just have so much to talk about this. So I don't want to get the cart before the horse. Oh my gosh. But
let's start with this, Josh. I am always one of the things I'm really fascinated about is passion generally. When you're clearly passionate about what you do. Can you recall the first time, either the first time you picked up a bow or the first time you picked up a bow and knew?
Yeah, my last name is Bowmar. So I think historically speaking, I was destined to be a bow hunter, but my whole lineage is full of hunters. Like my grandma on my mom's side was a state champion archer. My grandpa won tournaments as well. My uncle's a world champion with a traditional longbow. And so that was really cool. On my dad's side, they are super skilled hunters. And again, my mom's side, they are too. Don't get me wrong. But on my dad's side, my grandpa used to write books about how to kill big giant bucks. And our family was tied at one point for the most Ohio big bucks in the state. And then my grandma was the first woman to ever shoot a deer over 140 inches. And so with a lineage of that, I was destined to be a bow hunter. But to answer your question specifically, I picked up a bow as soon as I could. There's a picture of my mom shooting 8 months pregnant with me, and she's at an archery tournament. So the second I could pick up a bow, I did. And for me, hunting, it was very interesting. Growing up, my first compound I had, I wasn't allowed to use sights. Like my grandpa shot instinctive. Like you look at the modern compound bows and I use them. I'm not against them, but they're full of sights and gadgets and widgets and all these things to make you shoot an arrow very accurately. My family was like, you're not doing any of that until you shoot a deer with no sights. Your fingers are on the string, you're one with the arrow, and you kill your deer. Using everything else, as grandpa would say, you were a sissy. And so I was like, okay, grandpa.
I don't know if we're allowed to say that anymore, but I get you.
I get you. Yeah.
It was back then. It was back then.
It was back then. And because I really wasn't strong enough, even until I was about 12, to pull back the minimum legal bow weight of like 40 pounds, I didn't even harvest my first deer with a bow until I was 12. And that was a really amazing moment for me. I shot a little deer. It was not big at all, but I shot it with my bow. I shot it with no sights. And for me, like that was such a great experience because my dad was there, everybody, and they all come up and we're like looking at this deer. And until you hunt yourself, like you don't realize the spiritual connection you get with the food aspect of it. And there is a trophy, and we'll cover both, I'm sure, on this podcast. But from the food aspect of it, like you don't realize any of that until you shoot something yourself and you're feeding it. Because I remember very vividly, like I shoot a doe, it wasn't a buck, it had no trophy aspect to it. But then when we ate that, my dad said, "Hey, look, you provided for your family." And it registered right there because I ate deer my whole life.
Super primal.
I was like, whoa. And it triggered a part of me that I didn't realize was there. And it's a very primal part of your brain. And again, whether you're against hunting or not, it doesn't matter. If you are alive today, you came from a lineage of good hunters, because if you were bad hunters, you died and you wouldn't be around today, and your ancestral timeline would have stopped. And so I think that's important for people to understand, whether they're against it or not, they came from a lineage of hunters. And so when we bow hunt, whether you just start, whether you're young or old, you tap into a part of your brain that really people just shoot up their veins, honestly, all the time to be able to get that level of, it's not, adrenaline's a part of it, but I don't know the exact English word to be able to describe that. But it's euphoric in a way, not because you're killing something. That's where it's hard to describe, because you're not killing something and then glorifying that kill.
I think I can help you.
Maybe you can help me define that.
One of my books is called The Evolution Gap. And the evolution gap explores something that's referred to as evolutionary mismatch theory. So the human reward system was evolved basically in sub-Saharan Africa. And so the behaviors, say, for example, that the Hadza people conduct on a daily basis are the very behaviors that our reward system evolved to reward us for. And while you can go play Call of Duty and get some dopamine and stuff from doing that, the fact is that successfully growing your own food or executing your hunt, they set something off primal inside people, because that's how our neurotransmitters developed in the first place. And I think that you're absolutely right, that until somebody's had that experience, they can be disassociated from it. And I'm amazed at the number of people who are perfectly happy to be meat eaters, but they think of the idea of hunting as repugnant. And I'm like, maybe there's another thought process here.
We've all seen this. Even people that are against hunting, what do they do when they get their food? What's the first thing a lot of these people do? They pull out their phone and they're photographing it. Why would they do that? Like they're photographing death. And they're like, wait a second. It's because they're proud of this. At some point, they're like, oh, wow.
You aren't trying to say they're trophy hunting, are you?
Wow. Hang on a second. We can't be putting those accusations out there. But this is the point, right? So they're taking pictures of their burger and then they'll go online. And in their mind, they're not realizing that was a living animal. And what they're tapping into with that beautiful burger, that plate, is that reward system.
It reminds me of a comic years ago. The dude walks into the fish market and he says, hey, toss me 5 of those trout. Toss them to you? Yeah, that way I can go back and tell my family I caught them.
I want to say this because this is really important. I think for all the people that are on the fence about hunting, but they eat meat, or people that are against hunting, but eat meat, you need to have the understanding that the animals that you're eating every single day did not commit suicide, in that they were killed, they were harvested, they were dissected, and they were put into a mental, palatable version that you're okay with getting from a grocery store.
And largely they lived a they lived a significantly less satisfying life than
Of
an
course.
animal hunted. And I often say that when I see people that are the PETA types and the real ideologues, I'm like, listen, I don't even disagree with your intent in many ways. I understand that it's inconvenient. It's one thing,
Absolutely.
but if you were to focus on the quality of the animal's life rather than its manner of death, you'd accomplish something.
Again, from my experience in Africa, oh my gosh. First of all, trophy hunting should be celebrated because trophies are the oldest animals. And so people don't ever make that association
All right,
because
Josh, I'm going to push back on you here. I'm with you. I was wondering about going here. So I'm sitting in Botswana some years ago on a horseback safari, no hunting. There's rifles around, but they're for self-defense.
of course,
One of the families that's there is a wealthy family from America, and they're a hunting family and so on. And they started talking about hunting and conservation and the intersection between them. And I was like 99%, I get it, I understand it, I'm there. But of course, now my concern with the trophy hunting thing is that it's the opposite of nature. And what I mean by that is that it's not that a lion won't take a giant bull kudu, but it's bloody unlikely until he's decrepit enough for a lion to take him down. And so my concern with trophy hunting in that sense is that if you take out that giant bull kudu, or you take out a black rhino, or you take out any of these that are, say, the alpha or the trophy that you'd want, if they're still in their breeding cycle, this is not positive natural selection.
and I would agree with you, except you're still missing a part of this. See, trophy hunting is your goal is to shoot the biggest animal, correct? Antler size wise, not age side. They don't reach their max potential until they are, most of the time, there are exceptions, are past their breeding cycle or past that their physical capabilities of being able to defend their title, like a lion, for example. So I have lion hunted. I've never harvested a lion, but we were very specific about which lions we hunted. They were rogue lions that were not a part of a pride. We would never shoot a lion that's a part of a pride. Now, again, I tried to shoot a lion. We weren't successful. We spent 28 days hunting two very specific lions because they were very old, very large, and they weren't a part, and they were rogue lions. And so what these lions specifically did, because of their size and stature, that they were able to go into a pride because there were two of them, and they would fight the main lion, breed his girls, and then move on. And that was the two lions we could have shot other lions, and we would not have done it. And it wasn't because it wasn't the right thing. Now, in terms of the deer,
most rogue lions also have been ejected from a pride. It's very rare. Like they've been ejected from a pride often after having been, quote, alpha for 2 years.
Exactly.
And they're out. But and
the same concept with Cape Buffalo, right? They're called Dugga boys, which is Swahili for mud bull. So Dugga boys are lone bulls kicked out of the herd, and those are the
trailing the herd.
Yeah, they're always trailing the herd. They stay close, but they're always on their own. Those are traditionally very old buffalo, and they're very big horned sometimes. And again, they get to a point where then their horns start polishing down. They're not near as big. But to me, that's still a trophy because you're hunting something for what's between its ears, not necessarily what's on its head. But what's on its head is a reflection of what's in its ears. Because that buck behind you, that's a 200-inch deer. That deer was very old. He was 6 years old. Most deer don't live past 4. And if you're lucky, they get to 5 and 6. That is a great deer to harvest. Now, again, was he still able to breed and do all those things? Of course. And we could get into the deer side of it, but that's a whole other conversation. But I like Africa because you see two sides to Africa, so we can stay in there. But to go back to the kudu side of things, you were talking about, it's not what nature intended. And I want to address that because I agree exactly with what you're saying. I think the timeline of where we target the animals is just different. So for me, I don't want to shoot a kudu that's 52 inches that could be 60 inches if he was just a few years older. And so whenever I'm targeting an animal, my number one rule is age first. And again, you never want to shoot something young that's big because of what you were saying. You want him to pass on the genetics, and you can't rob from tomorrow for a harvest today. And
I saw a really good example of this, and it was a deep and intense conversation in the Waterberg Mountains, just south of Botswana. And I was sitting with a group of friends, and they had just come back from a rhino hunt. Now, Rhinos are barely hanging on by a thread in
I
Southern
agree.
Africa at this point, and they're only there because one guy saved about 40 of them in the late 1800s, and that's
Are you
why
talking
they're
about black
around.
rhinos specifically?
Both white and black
Yeah.
rhinos. They had been basically wiped out in sub-Saharan Africa. They were gone, but there were still 500,000 of them in Tanzania and Kenya at that stage in the 60s. But between now and then, they've killed 97% of all rhinos. And luckily in South Africa, there's been a little bit of a resurgence. So there's a few thousand white rhinos and a few hundred black rhinos in the Kruger Park. But anyway, these guys organized
And
a
on
rhino
some
hunt.
private ranches
Yeah,
as
in
well.
private ranges, mostly adjunct to the Kruger Park, but some out in the Waterberg. And basically at this stage, if you have enough land and you want rhinos in South Africa, you can have them, but it's the transport's difficult and then the protecting them is tough. Thorny
Well,
bush.
I would love to have this conversation about the rhinos because this is really a great example of value on an animal creates protection, right? So if we just did a white rhino hunt, my wife and I did, it was a green hunt. We didn't kill them. It's not legal to do so with a bow and arrow. So we did the whole tranquilizer dart. We documented the whole thing. It was really special. They had black rhinos there as well. We both did white rhinos, but I learned a lot about the conservation aspect of it. And this was very interesting to me. They banned him from being able to sell black rhino hunts.
Yeah.
And he only sold one black rhino hunt a year. And I asked him, I said, how much money do you generate from one black rhino? He told me he would make between $350,000 and $500,000 from one black rhino. It was an auction, so it varied. And he said, that's all I need to protect the entire ecosystem. He's
exactly. That's where I was going, Josh, is that these friends of mine organized the hunt. And I was like, a rhino of all things. And they exactly explained he was dominant, but he had been pushed out. He was no longer breeding. He was in his last year or two of life anyway. And had there been big lions in that area, he probably would have been out already. So they made the same argument.
Yeah.
Something like $150,000 went to the guides, locals, and went to the local park and conservation, and goes to anti-poaching in that area. You know, Kruger is currently losing 3 rhinos a day to poachers. And
that I didn't realize it was that bad. Is it that bad?
It's bad.
And I know guys that's work there. They are unbelievably aggressive. And they kill poachers on site there. This is not
it's the one crime.
Let's go to jail and all that. They shoot them.
It's the one crime where no warning is required. You don't have to say, put your hands up, you're under arrest. They shoot because they carry AK-47s.
And they know they're going to jail forever, so they will fight. But the thing is, what your audience really needs to understand, and this is something that I would encourage you to say in future podcasts when you're trying to teach somebody the understanding of conservation, is this very sentence I'm about to say. Nothing in the wild dies of old age. This is so important because we've conditioned ourselves as society to think these deer just get so old and they go sleep under a tree and they fall asleep and die in their sleep. Or the elephant gets so old, he just goes and beds down and goes to sleep. That is not reality. Disney lied to us. What happens is once they get so old and they're no longer contributing to their society and to their community, whatever it is, even if they have no community, they're not a part of a herd, they get to a point where they cannot take care of themselves and they become a part of the food chain. And when that happens, it is the most gruesome, worst death imaginable because no other animal in the world has remorse like people. When a lion catches a gazelle, it doesn't feel bad for the gazelle. That lion does not care that he's broke his spine and it's suffering. He just goes to eating it ass usually first. And that thing will suffer for hours and hours, depending on how long it takes for it to die. Now, as a hunter, my goal is to shoot one arrow into a perfect shot, and that animal is dead within seconds. And if you're targeting an animal that is past its prime, and again, the biggest racked animal, biggest horned animal, whatever that case is, the oldest animal, that is the best outcome for that animal. And I will die on the hill with that because in the wild, it is just so violent and it is not a death anyone deserves.
I'll give you a really easy to understand version of that for the real like ideological bunny huggers and conservationists. That Many years ago, one of the big conservation agencies was paying the Kruger Park a significant amount of money not to cull the elephants in the park. And this comes from a misguided sense of what's, in a sense, what's right and wrong. And what I mean by that is that what most people don't understand is that while today elephants in practical terms don't have any predators, because frankly, once an elephant's a couple of years old, the lions aren't getting anywhere near it until it's old enough that they can again. So they basically live impervious to hunting, but that's not how it always was. They used to be hunted by large saber-toothed cats. And I mean, big saber-toothed cats. The entire purpose of saber teeth is to be able to take out the throat of an elephant. Their teeth are not shaped like a traditional tusk. They're shaped like a saber. They're oblong, and they're designed for ripping and so on. And we pushed the saber-toothed cats, sapiens and our predecessors, pushed the saber-toothed cats into extinction in Africa, I guess about 2 million years ago. Obviously much more recently in the Americas because we didn't get there right away.
Yeah.
But once we pushed them out, and we largely pushed them out because we became the primary hunter of elephants at that stage, we pushed most of the elephant species into extinction. And we're basically left with Loxodonta africana and a couple of others around Africa, and that's it, they're gone. But now the problem is that the elephants living in the Kruger National Park face no predation. And the trouble with facing no predation is that they are, frankly, what's happening is an elephant gets 6 sets of teeth in their lifetime. And if they aren't hunted, then what's going to happen is that their teeth are going to wear out, because eating grass is a bloody difficult thing to do. And
Well,
so,
yeah, because they're also eating branches and trees, and their
that's
teeth,
exactly right.
their teeth are like on a conveyor belt. And
Yeah,
like you
and
said,
so
there's
then,
6 sets of teeth, and they lose them over time.
and when the 6th set is gone, when the 6th set is gone, they're basically out of luck. Like they've got a pretty serious problem because they can no longer eat. And so what happens is that they start to starve to death. And it's a horrible, terrible way to die. And of course, if a saber-toothed cat was there, the saber-toothed cat would have sorted that out, would have taken care of it, and that would have been the end of it. But instead, now those elephants are sitting in the Kruger Park, and they get older and older. And if a poacher doesn't take them, and which is the only real predation they suffer anymore, is if that doesn't happen, they are going to die a slow death of starvation.
That's the least of the Kruger's worries, because there's so many elephants, they're eating all of them out, and there's not enough land. And what they're not realizing is elephants are very destructive. And so elephants are knocking down trees like hornbill, for example. The hornbill, I'm pretty sure it's a hornbill. Correct me if I'm wrong by any means, but they need a 200-year-old tree in order to nest. And elephants will knock those down. So they're causing other species to go extinct because of the amount of elephants that are in that park specifically and not being hunted. And that it needs to be a thing that Kruger National Park allows, is people to pay and bid, because people would pay $1 million for a heavy tusker, which is 100+ pound tuskers. And people would pay $1 million, and that goes to conservation and whatever. Maybe that allows them to buy more land. So then the Kruger National Park is bigger and allows for more elephants, whatever. But that is a major problem with these. And last year I went elephant hunting for the first time. So I got to experience this in firsthand, see this in real time. I was fortunate enough to harvest one, and I could share that experience with the village and why we hunted where we did. There's so much with elephants in the wild and why it's critical. And I think it's important that I dive into this a little bit, because when someone hears you shot an elephant, it upset me as a hunter. I'm like, why would anyone hunt elephants? They're so intelligent. They have families. I was like, oh my gosh, this is never something I want to do. But the more I learned, the more I realized how ignorant I was on the subject. And
I'll tell you, Josh, take a look at this elephant here
yeah,
on my screen. If you look at his temples, I shot this picture. He was coming straight at me. And
oh, wow, you took this photo.
Yeah, I have a whole series from that one. I went and showed it to a friend of mine who's a guide in the park, and I was remarking at the contrast of the dust and all the beautiful things about the photograph, and he said, that photograph fills me with immense sadness. And I said, why? And he goes, look at the temples. His 6th set of teeth have worn out. And so he's eating 23 hours a day, but he cannot grind the grass sufficiently to pull nutrients from it. And so he is like a year and a half into his very slow death by starvation. And really what they should do is shoot him. And he won me over that day. I began to realize that There has to be a relationship. We have messed the environment and the ecology up sufficiently that we can't just assume that it's okay to let elephants breed at 12% per year. And by the way, what you said about the trees is completely right. And it's not, elephants are supposed to knock down trees. That's what they're supposed to do. In fact, if we had elephants in California right now, you wouldn't have the fires you have in America, because that's what elephants do. They thin forests. It's meant to be that way. And we used to have 11 species of elephants in North America before we hunted them out.
I didn't
But
know
now,
that.
yeah, mammoths, mastodons, and another 9 that, you know, that aren't as charismatic and what have you. But the point being is that there does have to be a relationship between conservation and responsible hunting. Most people don't understand that.
And I have to share my personal experience with hunting where I did, because this is so important to this, and it piggybacks right off of what you said. Where I hunted elephants was right next to the Serengeti. And so we were hunting very close to Serengeti. We actually bordered the Serengeti. And what bordered, basically the Serengeti was here. The hunting concession was here, hunting all wild, free-ranging animals, no fences. And then on the other side of this property was a massive amount of villages that were farmers. And those elephants would crop raid every single night. Witnessed it firsthand. They set up all these barricades to try to stop the elephants. And we interviewed them. We filmed a documentary on this. It was unbelievable. We haven't aired it yet. It'll probably be live in a couple of weeks. But we found that we went over to these people and we were interviewing them with a translator. And it was so incredibly sad, because these farmers are farming for themselves. They're not trying to sell it. They're not doing anything. It's just to feed their family. And they have grain storage bins that's attached to their house. And it's at the back of their house, which is also where a lot of children typically sleep. And we saw 3 or 4 different scenarios where an elephant knocked down the grain bin in order to eat all the grain, and as a consequence, killed those people's children. And this happens all the time. And they guard it. They have guards. They try to protect it. And it's just very difficult. It's a constant battle with the human and wildlife conflict over there. And what people don't realize, you say, oh, why don't they just shoot the elephants? First of all, it's a huge fine. The governments would obviously put them in jail and all this because they're trying to protect them. But if they banned hunting, what instantly would happen all those elephants would be poisoned. And because, again, they're stealing all of their grain, they're doing all this. But the reason they're not poisoned is because that concession that separates them.
Because there is a solution.
There is a solution. We are hunting those elephants, not all of them, just the big ones that are on their last set of molars. It's very obvious when they're on their last set of teeth, because they have body characteristics that you showed with the temples, the stature, all of that is, yep, he's on his last set of more teeth. It's very obvious. And his stool, you'll see a lot of undigested food.
Can't break it up properly.
Yeah, exactly. And so when we're tracking an elephant and he has beautiful feces on the ground, it's all perfectly digested, we know that's not an old elephant. I don't care how big his track is, we're gone. We're doing a different track. Now we see a track, big track, a lot of undigested food. We know he's on his last set of molars. I keep saying molars, molars. And we know, and that's a great elephant to pursue and see what he looks like, right? And so the thing is, what happened with my elephant hunt, we do all this interview, and we specifically were targeting elephants, trying to find a big one that was old, that was also doing crop raiding. And that's exactly what we found. And so what happens is, I shot an elephant. It was a very big elephant, about an 80-pounder, very impressive tusks. And when I shot that elephant, over 400 people showed up within 2 hours. And they completely dissected that elephant. They took all of its blood. Every last morsel of that meat was gone. And it fed that village for months. And I mean, they even took the blood. There was little kids. I have so many photos. I'll be happy to share these with you if you would like. I mean, it's amazing. And so there's just literally 400 people all over this elephant, and knives are going crazy. And this is what saves those elephants, is because not only does that entire village get meat, it lowers the value and demand for meat from poachers. Because normally poachers would go into the village and say, hey, would you guys like to buy some of my meat? Here's some meat, which they poached. No, we don't need it because we just got an elephant. And so now
also, it makes the local villages much more inclined to report on poaching and not to get involved in it, because they view that as stealing from them. Involving the community is a big part of stopping the problem.
Oh my gosh, you were so spot on with that. I'm very impressed with your depth of knowledge of this, because in a lot of places that I've hunted, if a poacher gets caught, the entire village doesn't get any food for 2 months. And so they self-police. It's the kangaroo court system over there. They catch a guy poaching, they beat him to an inch of his life, and he gets outcasted from the community, because now the entire community suffers. But then, so I love that you said that, because it's such an important aspect. But on top of that, community gets taken care of with school supplies, all kinds of different aspects and benefits from the hunting concession, even money, property damage, like where crop raiding happens and they lose something, they go and they prove it. It happens a lot with leopards, with livestock. Hey, I had a leopard killed. They come in, they pay for that animal because they don't want them to poison the leopards or the lions. And that symbiotic relationship and that ecosystem is the only thing that I've found. That model is the only thing that I've found that works in sustaining the wildlife where humans are interacting with them. Because the end result, if there is no hunting, there is no value on that animal. And if there's no value, there's no money to protect them. Like, you just think the government's going to go and protect all the wild animals?
Well,
They're
one
not.
way, Josh, to look at that is what will a family pay to go on a traditional photo safari in a game reserve compared to what a hunting party pays to go in? And it's just an unfortunate reality that the photo party is going to go in there and they're going to pay maybe $1,000 per head per night. And sure, it's money for that, but the hunters go in there and they're paying 10 grand a day per person per night or more.
Yeah.
And that money, if it's managed correctly, is going into that conservation effort.
And it has to be managed correctly, because that's what I love about this business model. If that outfitter took all the money and didn't give anything back to the concession, then that concession would no longer be sustainable, because poachers would run rampant. There'd be no trophy animals, which means he would have no more clients. And so this model, it doesn't matter if you're a dirtbag or not outfitter. It doesn't matter how greedy you are or not. You have to give back to the wild in order for it to be sustainable for future clients to keep coming. Because the second you pocket too much and you pull from the anti-poaching, you pull from the community, you pull from here, then the whole system collapses. And that model is just been proven to work time and time again. And Tanzania is such a great example of that business model working so well. And Kenya is a great example of them trying to do the national parks, ban hunting, and it just eradicated the entire wildlife. And
yeah, it's been really rough. Let's take a step back to life for a moment. You were talking about your experience of holding a bow for the first time and it being part of your family and so on. And I've spent a lot of time among the Hadza people hunting with them, and I can tell you that the little kids of even 3 years old are walking around with a small bow and they're already practicing archery. It's that ingrained in their culture. They're already doing that, just walking around shooting arrows at things. The arrows aren't so sharp.
sure.
But there's something very, I don't know how to put it, but when you watch that happening, there's something just right about watching those kids do what their parents are doing in miniature form and so on. And in any event, on one of our trips, we go to my very first trip, in fact, we went there and the chief handed me a bow, and he handed me a bow and an arrow, and he pointed at a piece of baobab wood. They use baobab wood because it's porous and it won't damage the arrows. It's like a good target.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've done some archery. So I grab the bow and I try to pull it back and I can't.
Oh, wow.
I can't pull it back. And this is a bow that looks much like that one. It's made from local wood. It's made with local gut. It's like, how is it that I've pulled back like proper compound bows? I don't know what the measurements are, but I can't pull this one back. And the chief comes up to me and he goes, "You're doing it wrong." And he goes, "Bring the bow into your body." And I'm like, "What?" So now I'm holding the bow close to my body like this. I'm like, "This is insane. Now I definitely can't pull it over. At least now I had a shoulder. Now I got nothing." And he goes, "No, push." So I push and thump. The arrow, my fingers were so sore. The arrow goes flying out. And Josh, I'm going to be really clear. Not through any skill of mine, the arrow went into the wood.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And I had 4 arrows, and I got 2 of my 4 into the wood using his technique like that. And as a result of that, he invited me to go on my very first hunt with them. And this is long before they became tourist friendly the way they are now. We went out. It was absolutely mind blowing. And I just wanted to share, because I think a big part of this is, hey, getting your family into nature. And I know that's a big thing for you. Is I later went and did an embedded stay with them. And I stayed for a week. I took no food. I took water because I'm not stupid. But I didn't take food. I figured worst case, I've fasted for 7 days before. I can handle it.
I love it.
And on the very first day, the chief took me out with the group, with the dogs, and we went 27 miles. And we got nothing. We got a few birds. I think we got a little rodent or two. Nothing. Nobody was being sustained by this. We got back that night, and in the next morning, Nona, the chief, or Ngonga, as they would more likely pronounce it, but he says, let's go. And I go, what do you mean, let's go? And he goes, we don't have any food from yesterday, so we got to go. So we'd already done 27 miles, fasted, basically with no food. And we went out again immediately and did 17 miles. And the 17th mile was carrying in parts a bush pig back to camp that we'd scored, which is, of course, quite a payoff for the village. But
yeah, that's huge.
That experience to me was like getting in a time machine and going back and experiencing what most of our ancestors experienced long before agriculture and what have you. And it's really made me value sharing that. I now take people with me sometimes when I go. I don't know if Paul Saladino from the carnivore kind of movement, but
yeah,
I took him out there. I took Anthony Gostin from Perfect Keto, and Jeffrey Perlman's one of the founders of Zumba. It's been really interesting to take people out of this world and into that. But what I'm really fascinated by is taking kids into nature and integrating them in and getting them off their iPads and stuff. And I know you've got some thoughts about that. And I know you've got, if I understand, 2 kids, right?
I do. Yeah.
So tell me about that. How do you integrate your kids into this, and how does it impact them?
First of all, I love you sharing that story, because you say those miles, 26 miles to 17 miles. People have no idea when you're hunting how mentally and physically demanding that is, because you're just not walking upright. Like, you're just fine. Sometimes you're sneaking, sometimes you're leaned over. You're always on uneven ground or sand. So you have instability.
And never mind the thorn trees.
Oh yeah. Forget the thorn trees that are ripping you to pieces and everything else. And because wherever the tracks go, that's where you go, whether that's through a freaking jungle that's full of snakes or whatever, or it's through the open desert with no shade. That's where you go. And that is just so unbelievable. You did that back to back, but then scored. And that just goes back to how we feed. And we should get into the fitness side of things, health and diet, and how it correlates back to this, because it's very good. But I want to answer your question about the kids in the outdoors, because I think this is going to help a lot of listeners that have kids that aren't necessarily hunters, because the barrier to entry to hunting is pretty steep, to be honest. They're like, okay, I want to buy a bow. I want to get a bow hunting, but I live in an apartment. Like, you got to find a place to practice. Like, well, how do I even learn? Hamster. Yeah. Like, how the hell am I going to even learn how to shoot a bow? Now, luckily there's pro shops in every single city, wherever you are. If you look up archery pro shops, they could teach you how to shoot. You might have to pay a little extra, but they'll set up your bow for you. There's a lot of things you can do. But specifically for kids, love to be outside. If they don't love to be outside, it's only because they don't realize the kind of fun that could be having. And so they haven't been introduced to it. They haven't been I don't want to be out here. Oh, I just want my iPad. I just want my iPad. And they're like, oh, okay. They're unhappy. They don't like to get muddy or cold. My kids hate it. You just need to be a little more patient. And so what happens is you need to get creative with creating games for them that are outside and make it to where achievable challenges for these kids. So for example, hey, let's take these rocks and try to hit this little leaf that's in this pond. Hey, go out there and play. And they're like, I don't know what to do. It'd be like me dropping you off in anywhere. And you're like, I'm bored. But then all of a sudden there's this whole world of games. And you say, hey, there's a puddle over there. Hey, let's figure out how to get across it without getting wet. And you're like, oh my gosh, how do we do this? Let's go find a branch and see if that works. And you create these little fun games where you're creating challenges that are achievable. Because if it's like, hey, here's a pond, let's build a boat and get across it. No one's going to want to do that. It's too hard.
That's next year.
You just progress it with the kids. But it could be as simple as, oh my gosh, that over there, look at that. And it's across the creek and up a hill and there's some trees in the way, but there's a very identifiable rock. We have to get to the rock. I just did this with my 4-year-old. I said, how do we do that? Like we have to go on an epic adventure and there's a creek and a pretty steep bank. So this is going to take some problem solving, right? I'm
Yeah.
like, all right. And my daughter's name's Oakley. I'm like, Oakley, you're the guide. How are we going to do this? She's like, I don't know. I'm like, what do you think we should do? I'm like, and she's like, we got to get across the creek. I'm like, all right, let's find a place to cross. And so then we created this game out of nothing. And it was literally just to get to a rock. And it was so exhilarating for her because she figured it out. She figured out a way to get up the hill, get through the thorny brush, do all this, and got to the rock. And it was a huge achievement. And parents, if I, and people, this is a summary for everybody. You have to earn your pleasures. You have to earn your dopamine because right now you take your phone and you swipe freaking 5 times, you get dopamine hit. We do not have to earn our dopamine anymore. And there is a balance of pain and pleasure in your brain. And when you are increasing that dopamine, pain's coming, whether you want it or not, because you have to have that balance. So it's better to endure challenging first to earn your dopamine, because then you're in a constant state of balance where if you're always in this elevated dopamine state, then you're going to experience a lot of pain in your life. You're going to always be depressed no matter what. And so you'll always be chasing that little dopamine instead of earning your dopamine. Kids, it is critical with kids that they earn their dopamine. And when I mean by dopamine, it's just the pleasure centers of the brain and all this. So iPads, all of that are just quick dopamine hits. You're going to have a naughty freaking kid, a rotten child, if they don't have to earn their dopamine. And it can be as simple as getting cold. Hey guys, let's jump in this little cold tub or whatever, but getting outside, earning their fun. And I promise you, you're going to have amazing kids. And that is just so easy to do because you don't need land. You can go to a park, you could go anywhere and just let the kids figure it out. And that is such a critical part, I think, for raising children.
Yeah, it really is. And one of the things I found with my little girl is she was introduced to electronic devices out of necessity. Her mom and I had split up, and it was there needs to be a way of communicating or whatever. But one of the things I've shown her is that let's say she spends an hour banging away on some device, then she's tired. And she knows it. And she knows that her energy drops when she's doing that. Then we go horseback riding. We live here in the Dominican Republic, and we go horseback riding. We're crossing rivers. It's like serious horseback riding.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, we're tired and we're beaten up, but we feel fantastic. And it really is interesting. It's one thing you can tell your kids this stuff. Oh yeah, if you do that, you're going to feel, but when you can show them, you go, look, you see how you feel right now after an hour of screen time? You don't feel so good, do you? You're the one telling me now. Then you finish up a horseback trip like that, and she's like, I feel amazing. And I think giving them that contrast, but too many kids these days. I saw a judge once speaking about this, and he goes, I sat on the bench for 30 years, and he says, I don't think I ever sent a kid to reform school or prison who had been fishing with his parents.
Wow. Isn't that something? Yeah. And I'm with you. There is a balance. I'm not against iPads and technology. They're going to grow up with it regardless.
Yep.
The rules that we have in our house, I think it's very important that you do both. You don't get your iPad unless you're eating. If you're eating, you can get your iPad. And that's like our rule. So as soon as the eating stops, iPad goes away. And then we'll pull it out on long car rides, which are very rare, or dinners where we're like in a very nice place. We need kids to be distracted, whatever. Fine. I understand those scenarios, but you cannot use that as a babysitter because you're robbing your children of their future development because they need to go outside. They need to get creative. They need to create their own fun and earn their pleasures, or you are just going to have
I got to give you
adult.
I got to give you a little thought or pushback or whatever you want on this. One of my companies is called WildFit, and we're largely based around nutritional anthropology, but mostly the biggest hit is food psychology. We've had probably, 150, 200,000 people go through our programs in 100 countries around the world, largely helping them undo the linkages that the food industry and their parents made them create with food. I just want you to think about something. The reason that we get such a big dopamine hit and a serotonin hit from eating calories is that it used to be a life-saving activity. Right. And part of the reason for the dopamine and serotonin is not simply to reward you for the end result, it's to help you establish the pattern of behavior that created the end result. So in other words, when you go hunting and you track and you're quiet and you observe and you smell and you listen, and then your arrow hits the mark, the celebratory chemicals that you create in your body are not simply to reward you for hitting the mark, but they're also to lock in the memory of the strategies that you used to hit the mark.
I've
So
never heard it put that way, and it's exactly correct. That is
that's
amazing.
exactly it. That's how you can get an amateur sports person bang their head on their locker before they play in the World Series and win the winning game. And then they'll bang their head on their locker for the rest of their lives and nothing to do with it. But it's that superstition is an evolutionary response. So here's the only challenge I would push back on you with is that your kids are now being taught that watching TV is the activity that results in this payoff. You understand? And that, so if it were me, what I would be doing is saying, you get to have your iPad time after you did the yard work, because it's the reward for the hunting, or after you read that book, but not, I would never, because you're now putting two dopamine activities layered on top of each other. Later, they're 32 years old, they're feeling some depression, and either a screen or food could solve the problem for them, and they're going to go to both. That's just my thought. I don't want to.
Hey, I don't mind criticism. Running businesses, you're an entrepreneur yourself.
Optimization, we call it.
You have to be able to take that. And I love that advice. My kids are 3 and 4, so they're super young. So I love this idea of being able to get that reward system based around something that's more beneficial than food, because you're right. Like the food itself is its own reward system. And I love that. You're going to make me get more creative with how we do that, because you're right. At the end of the day, we're not raising kids, we're raising adults. And at the end of the day, however you end up raising your kids is how they're going to end up being adults. And so I love that aspect, and I'm going to look into that to figure out and get more creative with it. So thank you for that advice.
You're welcome. You're welcome. My favorite
received.
My favorite parenting quote is that you are not here to prepare the road for your children. You're here to prepare your children for the road. And
a great line.
Yeah, I think about it often. Let's turn to something else. What you've done really successfully that a lot of people would like to do is you have figured out a way to, in a sense, profit from your passion. You've said, hey, here's this thing that I have absolutely loved doing with my life. And because there are many people that take hunting as a hobby and it costs them money. What you've done is you've said, here's this thing that I do, and I'm going to turn it into a business. You've turned it into a business through production. You've made films. You've developed a big social following, YouTube and what have you. And then you also went out and created a nutrition company, and I think you even make bows or design bows. So talk to me.
Yeah, we have a whole archery company. I invented a broadhead nose button, like all kinds of different anchor points for archery and some really cool stuff. But yeah, so your question is, how do you want me? So what exactly do you want me to?
Like, what was the progression of taking a passionate hobby and turning it into a lifestyle and a business?
Honestly, I was never motivated by trying to turn something into a business. For me, I just got frustrated with what was available. And so like the nutrition brand, I just hated every single protein powder there was. And so I'm like, making protein can't be that hard. Let's do it ourselves. And then of course, at the surface level, that sounds great, right? That doesn't sound too hard. Then you realize all the manufacturing, everything that goes into it. And you're just like, oh my God, you're no longer optimist. You're like, this is the worst thing in the world. What am I doing? But you're committed at that point, and you fail your way through figuring all these problems out. And I had 2 different nutrition companies that did not work the first time, but those were great lessons for me to learn. And I love this line in my life. And I constantly tell my kids, even though they don't understand what it means, but I'm saying it anyways. But I tell people that are close to me, sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. And that aspect, you can never lose if you always learn from whatever it is that you're doing. And so for me, that was the nutrition brand. We started I was into competitive bodybuilding, and I did the men's physique stuff. I sold coaching programs, and all my customers and clients were buying protein powders and pre-workouts. I'm like, I should make these. There's nothing great. And so that kind of started that. But then to scale it to be one of the largest nutrition companies in the world, which it is, I think we're number 5 or 6 in direct to consumer. So like of all the direct to consumer nutrition companies in the world, we're like top 6 for sure, which I'm very proud of. And that came from having a great team and again, my guys, they're fantastic. My wife is amazing. And again, I'm a dreamer. I'm an inventor. I've invented lots of products. When it comes to execution, I'm all in. But structurally, I'm not very good at the structure side of things. So having people that are great at that are very important. And we have an amazing team that helps scale it to be huge. But it all goes back to quality. We never, ever prioritized money over quality. In fact, we went the direct to consumer route, which back when we started in 2018 was a terrible idea. All the nutrition companies all went to stores. That was how you made all your money. But we didn't do that because we couldn't make a good enough product with the margins that we were left with.
Yeah.
And real quick with that, the store needed 50% margin. We needed 50% margin on the product in order to be able to double our inventory of every product we sold. So that left us with $10 to be able to make a tub of protein out of, and all artificial flavors and sweeteners, everything was just absolute crap. And we said, if we don't sell to stores, we just sell direct to consumer, then we have up to $20 or $25 we can put into it, which is real ingredients, higher quality flavors, higher quality protein, all of that. And so we said, we're not doing the store thing. We're just going to do direct to consumer and make a better product. So at the end of the day, for us, it always came back to making a better product. And for me, with the archery business side of things, YouTube, I loved hearing stories like from the media side of things. I loved my grandpa and my dad telling hunting stories, and I always wished I could just watch them. And I just very early in my life, I'm like, you know what? I will not have my children say that. They will be able to watch every single hunt that I ever do from every single camera angle you can think of. Any story that I have, no matter how crazy it is, it's going to be on video. And I want to be able to share that because it was a very anchoring part of my life, taking a deer, if I shot a spike, to the check-in station. And then you get that admiration from the locals and the community. And they're like, hey, congrats on your bow kill. Yeah, it's a spike. Who cares? It's an amazing accomplishment to do with a bow because it's so difficult to get that close and be able to execute a good shot. And so I loved that. And I was like, and so for me, making these videos, filming them as real as I can and having all the live camera angles, it's like YouTube is like the check-in station to the world. I can bring people on that may never get to experience Tanzania or Africa, and they can experience it through me because I grew up on a dirt road out in the middle of nowhere. I didn't come from any money at all. My family, unfortunately, got hit super hard in 2008, filed bankruptcy. My dad was a plumber. My mom cleaned houses. And so it's not like I inherited anything. All of what I've built came off of the backs of myself, my wife, and our team now, but it all was just us in the beginning. I self-filmed for 8 years. I edited all my own content. I became an expert in videography and photography and editing. I did all of that. And I'm not saying that to be chauvinistic or pompous, but most people don't realize everything you want in life is one skill away or two, depending. If you want to be a doctor, you got a lot of skills to learn. But if you want to be something, and most of it is achievable through skill development. And most people can never get the skills because of this one priority. And they prioritize entertainment over education. They prioritize pleasure over purpose. And then instead of doing the work to develop the skill, which again is not fun, no one likes sucking at something, which you suck at everything the first time you do it. And then eventually you get good. And then eventually you develop the skill that then can further you in your life. And for me, with the business side of things, I had to develop an expert in marketing, an expert in sales, an expert in product development, formulations, all of this, because I didn't have any money to hire people to do it for me. And again, it just takes a long time, but it can be done. And then, so on the YouTube side of things, or from the nutrition side of things, that's how that kind of started. From the YouTube side of things, I just always filmed my stuff and put it out there. And I sucked in the beginning. My videos were terrible. I think all of them are. If you're wanting to be a YouTuber, just make 100 videos. Your first one's not going to go viral.
Get going.
Yeah, just do it. Good is good enough. All you have is your phone. Use your phone. Whatever you can do to create content, do it. And but don't do it without learning from each one. What didn't you like? What did you like? Why didn't it do well? Why did it well? Extract little things from all the creators that you like, make your own thing, and then go with it. But on the archery side of things, that's a different story because now I invented things that didn't exist before. The nose button, that was just an accident. The peep tuner, same kind of things to fix peep rotation. My broadhead, which is Beast Broadhead's a brand new broadhead. We've invented an unbelievable broadhead. I could talk about that. But the nose button specifically, I used to tie serving on my string and then use it as an anchor point. But it kept moving and it made me annoying. It was really annoying. So then I 3D printed like a product with a bunch of spikes all over it because I'm like, that's going to be precise. And it did so many neurological things. Like kind of flicking you in the forehead. Like when you go full draw on an animal, it's so hard to shoot because you're in this crazy adrenaline state, and being poked in the nose was like, oh, it was like centering and allowed me to shoot better. And I was like, oh my gosh, I should give this to other people. And so I actually gave it to a world champion archer. I said, hey, will you try this and let me know if you like it? And then he never got back a hold of me. And I was like, gosh, he must have hated it. I'm like, and so I down on my dumps because I hadn't made the product yet. It was just a prototype. And then I see him in a tournament and he's got it on his bow. And I'm like, no way. And
That's cool.
I reached back out. He's like, man, I love this thing. He went on to win multiple world championships with it. We had it in the Olympics. We've broken multiple archery world records with this product. And again, it was all out of me just hating the serving on my string. So it did a bunch of things that I wasn't prepared for, but I still will take the credit. Go me. But it was,
of course.
It was cool.
You know, it reminds me, I read about this woman in Australia. Crocs became all the rage. I'll still never understand that. But she started creating these little jewels that could poke through the holes of the Crocs for her kids. And then their friends started asking for them. So she started selling them. Next thing, she's selling her company. They ended up, I think they called it Crocs Teeth. And she sold it back to Crocs for millions of dollars. Like all she did was see a little moment and say, I can jump in on that little moment. I have a modification. And you know what's crazy? How many of us have those thoughts and simply don't act? Like this is a silly example, but tell me that the idea of Uber was like not thought of by about a few things. How many times have you been standing up, if you're old enough, standing outside a conference in the rain going, why can't I get a taxi? Surely there should be an app for this. There's a lot of credit is given to the idea, but I think you've just really said it. The idea is a tiny piece of the whole thing. It's the follow through. It's the making the prototype. It's the putting it in the field. It's making sure it worked.
Yeah. And that's the thing. An idea like Uber is very difficult, right? But an idea like, oh, I want a corner Christmas tree that's just squared off in the back. That's a much better idea. You can make a prototype of that pretty quick. Yeah. And most people love the thought, and this is the big separation. Most people love the thought of having a good idea and the potential that they could be a millionaire with their idea, so much so they won't even Google if it exists. And they'll have this great idea and they tell me about their idea. Have you ever Googled if it exists? No. I'm like, then this isn't even serious yet. But so most people, when they get an idea, if they just acted on it and just exhausted every resource to see if it's possible. And again, you're like, I don't have any money. Who cares? So much of this stuff is free. You get a good enough idea, you could find a partner, someone to help in, you can pull together money, whatever is necessary. It doesn't take that much to make a prototype. Now, if you have a dirt bike idea, it's a little bit different than a little gadget for your kitchen. But 3D printers are $150 and you could 3D print stuff. You could hire someone to 3D print stuff for you for a few $100. Most of this stuff is affordable. Stop drinking your Starbucks every day, save up your money to make a prototype. And getting an idea that works is the smallest micro spot or micro part of a product. Because again, a great example would be McDonald's, right? I think you and I both could make a better cheeseburger than McDonald's.
Pretty sure.
Yeah, of course. Why don't we have the largest fast food chain in the world? What the heck? We can make a better product, but there's a business aspect to it. But the thing about business is you don't learn it all before you start. And you just cannot do that. You got to be able to just take it in the teeth over and over again, and you'll get little glimpses of hope that keep you going. But as long as you just keep pushing forward, you'll eventually end up with a successful business, or you will know with absolute certainty that it cannot be done. And that is a great place to be. Most people quit early. Now, I'm not saying, oh, I run into my first hiccup and I throw it all in the trash. If you totally exhaust the resources of knowing that it can or cannot be done, you can live a much happier life instead of this fictitious world where you're like, oh, that was my idea. Putting a Dorito into a taco, that was my idea. And I'm like, really? Okay, get out of here.
It relates to something you said earlier about the way we learn. And I observed this in really an interesting way, that my ex-wife was quite good at learning languages. When we first moved to the island, she picked up Spanish pretty quickly. And I just didn't. I'm good at English. I write well. I speak well. Picking up a language was a lot harder for me. And I couldn't understand that because I'm not any less smart than she is. It just wasn't working for me. Then one day we went to Whistler, British Columbia, to go skiing. And I'd always thought about trying to snowboard, but it's if you have 3 days, am I going to ruin my 3 days? I can ski and I'm going to have fun. But we had 2 weeks. So I made a deal that I would ski for the first week and then snowboard on the weekend. And if I liked it, then I could finish it out that way, or I could go back to skiing. Nice way to do it.
Yeah.
So I go for my lesson and with my son, who's say 16 at the time. And we get on the mountain, and within 15 minutes, I'm snowboarding. Literally, like, I'm so bored with the class, it's driving me absolutely insane. Now, by the way,
amazing.
Partly it helped is a kiteboard. I don't know if you're familiar with kiteboarding.
Oh, I didn't know exactly what it is, but I never actually done it. So it's the same.
Well, have you wakeboarded?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so kiteboarding is like wakeboarding, only you control the boat with your mind and it can fly.
Yeah, that's so
that's
cool.
the difference for you.
Yeah,
But anyway, as much as that had gotten me used to board sports, you have to remember also kiteboarding is about leaning back on the board and snowboarding is about leaning forward. So it's not the same sport at all. But something changed in me, and I went to the instructor and I go, look, I'm bored silly. Can I just go boarding? And he goes, no, you have to finish your lesson. And I go, come on. How can I prove to you I'm ready? He goes, you need to be able to do a jump 180. You'll need to do that because if you get stuck against the boundaries and stuff. So I did a jump 360.
Oh my gosh.
And he goes, okay, forget it. You can go. And I went, and my son stayed in the class. But here's the crazy part. My wife at the time had done 4 days of lessons. She was there with the Archery staff. They were having their Whistler lessons. And she did 4 days of lessons. And I come whipping down the mountain and smack her on the bum as I go by. And she's so angry with me, not about the smack so much, but she's like, how do you learn so damn fast? Like, you had 15 minutes of lessons and now you're ripping down the mountain. And that night, we had a conversation that changed my life to some degree. And that was, we examined why it is that she's able to learn languages so quickly and I'm able to learn physical things so quickly. And here's what it came down to. She was a professional tennis player and a perfectionist. So when she wanted to learn something physical, she really had to break it down. She had to get it perfect. She was afraid to get hurt. She was afraid of looking bad. She didn't want her ego was in the way.
Oh, sure.
Guess what? When I was learning a language, I had the same problem. I was afraid of making the mistake. I was afraid of the accent not being right. All of my fears were getting in the way of the language and all of her fears. It was a massively interesting moment. And it relates to what you said earlier about learning, but it also relates to starting the business. If you are afraid of learning experiences, go get a job and get a salary and hunker down and hope you don't get laid off.
Yeah, it's so funny because, again, you got to check your ego at the door. And it really does depend what type of business you're doing. But in today's world, if you're an Uber driver, you're your own boss and you can scale specific businesses as high or as low as you want. But one of the best pieces of advice I could give anybody that's even remotely interested in starting a business or getting a job, they don't know. Most people just wander through life and react to what life is giving them. And I think one of the best pieces of advice I could give them is understand the exact perfect life that you want. And I think if you really look at that and you say, hey, I want to be able to travel and do whatever I want. I'm like, okay, so you need time and money. All right. I want a private jet. Okay. Why? Because I want to be able to fly anywhere. I'm like, you can do that with a normal plane ride. Why do you need a jet? And then you just break down every little thing. Then you realize you really don't need that much stuff. You're like, I want to be able to travel. Okay, where do you want to go? I want to go to Alaska. All right. What do you want to do in Alaska? I want to hike this particular Mount Denali. Okay. That only costs about $2,000 for everything. So you just need to be able to have $2,000 of disposable income. You're a long ways from needing to be a business owner. You just need to be a person with a good job. Yeah. Oh, okay. But then you really realize, oh, I want to be able to help my family. I want my family to be able to work for me. I want to be able to provide for all these people. I want to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And then you're like, yeah, you better be a business owner. What are your skills? And you're like, what are you good at? And at the end of the day, in today's world, to be a business owner is very simple because currency is attention. And so if you want to be a successful business owner, you first have to start with capturing attention. And so building social media, which is free, whatever you're interested in, become the best. If you want to be a barista, then let's use coffee, for example. You want to start your own coffee brand. You better be a good barista, make videos on how to make coffee. You do this, you build a large social media following, then you private label some coffee, and then you sell your coffee to your database of people, and then you have your own business. And that sounds simple, but it is not, because it's competitive in the attention space. So you have to be really good at your job. There's no easy way to be successful at anything, which is what makes those things so valuable. If it was easy to get a six-pack, no one would value a six-pack. But everybody knows the level of discipline and everything that it takes to be able to have a six-pack. That's what makes it valuable. So when you're on the brink of giving up or doing whatever, those are the moments I love, because then I'm like, everyone else is going to quit. I said, I'm going to push through. This is my moment that I could be a little bit better, which means I'm going to be get ahead. You got to find your moments to get ahead. Whenever you're sitting there and you're on Netflix and you're mind watching whatever for 5 hours, that's what everyone else is doing. What if I only watch Netflix for an hour and I spend the other 2 hours developing a skill in marketing? Now you're getting ahead, and take pride in that. Or maybe you don't watch Netflix at all. Maybe you got whatever people's priorities and timeline. The timeline is just based on your level of skill learning. So if you are really smart and you can learn really fast, it's going to be a lot easier for you versus a big dummy like me that has to study something intently forever. But I can promise you, I will, with my work ethic, and if I'm stupid, and if that's not politically correct, whatever, I don't care. If I'm stupid, but I'm willing to work every single day on something, I will get much further ahead than someone that's smart, that's not willing to work at all. And so you don't need to be smart. You don't have to have any sort of background or nothing.
Josh, I'd even go that sometimes being smart is the obstacle. I've seen it so many times.
Yeah.
Somebody's so smart, they feel like they can do it all, and then they don't delegate, they don't ask for help, and their ego gets in the way. And it's like, I can do that better than this person. Yeah, you could, if you did it, but you have a million other things to do. So that means you're not doing it. Let that person do it 80% of you, and teach them and get them there. So being smart is not requisite. In fact, it can be an obstacle.
Can I share real quick? Can I share a piece of advice that I think would be really helpful for every listener that I did, and how I developed skills and all these other things? And it's nothing you guys have to do any different. So please listen to me when I say this. You need to turn your car into a traveling university.
Yeah.
Now, let me explain what this means. The average person spends 34,000 miles a year in their car. That's equivalent to 2 college semesters worth of time. And most people entertain themselves with mindless radios, whatever. If you're memorizing songs during your car ride, you are wasting so much time. Listen to music at the gym. Use that car time. No matter what, when you get in, you are developing a skill, and you just reverse engineer your perfect life. You map that out, and you know exactly where you want to be. And then you know exactly where you are, not where you think you are, not where you're raw. I'm feeling good about myself. No, where you are. You suck at marketing. You need to get better at it. You are whatever you want to say, and whatever your flaw is, know where you want to go, and then find books that teach you along the way. But then turn your car into a traveling university, and it will change your life, because every year you'll get 2 college semesters worth of time.
Yeah.
And
it's absolutely phenomenal. There's no question about that. I say the same thing with planes. A lot of people are commuting for work on their own planes and stuff. Like, it's your ultimate opportunity. And my publisher, Mind Valley, actually has our courses on many of the airlines. So if you're flying on Emirates, for example, I'm on there. I'm there helping people get better every time. They can do that amazing, instead of watching Taken again. Josh, I want to do a little trivia with you here now.
Okay.
So let me just, there we go. Let's have a look at these. Now, I told you before I'd spent a bunch of time with the Hadza people. So I know you already know this one, but feathers, let's identify. They're all the same in this case, but the feathers are?
Guinea fowl.
They are absolutely guinea fowl. But now let's talk about prey. All right.
Okay.
Now, the reason I've got these is that having lived with and stayed with the Hadza over 15 years, last November, the chief brought my family in, and we were there, and they brought us back to the camp one night and had a huge ceremony, and they made me an honorary member of the tribe. Gave me
that's
a
amazing.
bow, which the one I showed you earlier before we started, and then a quiver of arrows and so on. So I want to go through some arrows with you, and your job is to figure out the prey. All right.
Okay. All right. I'm ready.
Here we go. Arrow number 1.
Oh, wow. Okay. Can you turn it side? Okay. So it's thin. I would say, oh my gosh, there's so much. And what part of Africa is this?
This is East Africa. This is Tanzania, the Hadzabe.
Okay. I would go with.
I'm going to give you a clue before you say that.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see the discoloring here.
I can't. It looks like it would stop. So I would imagine that would be more for birds or something like that. But just because of the stopping aspect, I was originally going to say plains game because the blade is so long, but it could be like rabbits or stuff.
It's actually, you're dead on. It's plains game. And the reason I'm telling you about the discoloration is from here to here, they pack in a black tar that's poisonous.
Oh, okay. That makes more sense because I was
There you
like,
go.
that's going to stop it and that won't go through. But my original guess was going to be plains game because the blades was too thin.
All right, all right. Now, how about this one? But I'll give you a hint. Normally, it has a corn on the cob right about here.
Oh, that'll be rodents and birds for sure.
Absolutely. No question about it. You nailed it. Similarly, how about this one?
Oh, I would just say for practice stump shooting or for small game.
Birds and small rodents as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And then this is the real tricky one.
Fish.
It's not. I'm going to give their definition, and then I'll give you another guess.
Okay.
It's for what they refer to as smart prey.
Ah. Would it be baboons?
That's exactly right. Well done. Well done. That's for prey that it's for prey that can pull them out.
Pull it out. Wow. Yeah. I would have said fish because of the barb, but you're right. The baboon, they can pull their own out. That's insane.
I've been hunting. We've scored baboons, and that, I'm telling you, that is a lot less like hunting and a lot more like warfare than you would probably want to appreciate. It's out there.
I've hunted baboons myself, and they are violent. People don't realize. Look at their jaws. Look at their teeth. It is a violent thing, but it is.
And they're smart. They're very smart. Josh, I imagine we can do a part 3 here, but what I wanted to ask you is, you already answered one of my questions. I'm curious, like if you had the one advice you could offer everybody, and you've given us that beautifully. It was really nice. What I would want to ask at this point is 2 questions to finish on. Is if you think about all the stuff that you've accomplished and you've done and what have you, and I want to add a little data point here. You mentioned earlier, like the effort that goes into creating, say, a 6-pack or creating wealth or what have you. I read this the other day. I didn't verify it, but I read the other day that there are more millionaires than there are millionaire men than there are men with 6-packs.
Oh, wow.
So to become a millionaire is easier than maintaining a 6-pack into your 50s and 60s. It's easier.
Wow.
But then what's really bloody difficult is to be a millionaire with a 6-pack. That's pretty tough going.
That's the hardest part. Yeah.
There you go. So the question I have for you is, with all that you've achieved, you've dialed in your body and your health, your hobby, your passion, your business stuff, what would you say is the biggest challenge that you faced?
The biggest challenge for me?
Yeah.
Getting away from thinking, or I want to say this correctly, getting away from needing validation from other people. That is by far the biggest thing that I've always struggled with, for sure. I've never been asked that question, so the answer came relatively easy to me, but I've always been worried for me because I've always wanted to be liked and loved and all of this, but I realized everyone cheers for you, like when you're down in the bottom and you have big goals and dreams, but when you go through the fire and you get to the top, everyone stops cheering for you, and that's a weird place to be because then everyone stops cheering for you. They start throwing stones or waiting for you to fall off the mountain, and that's what brings them joy. And that was a very weird transition for me because with my background and all the work that I had to do and overcome and the family, everything that I had to do, I would have thought I would have been celebrated more, but instead I've just been being torn down over and over again. And then I had to reframe how I looked at the aspect of other people looking at me. And that was very difficult.
I'll tell you something that helped me a lot with that, because I've been through that as well. And you're absolutely right. When you're down in the dumps, everybody's there to go, oh yeah, don't worry. Everything.
You got this.
You start achieving some stuff, and the envy, the jealousy, the takers, the fakers, and the charlatans show up, and it's difficult. And I'm sure you've probably heard about this study, but the basic idea was that and I can't remember if it was, I think it was monkeys, but it doesn't really matter. The point is, you take a bunch of monkeys, put them in a bin, and you put some food, you put a bunch of bananas up high. And when one of the monkeys goes up to get the bananas, you spray all of the other monkeys with cold water. And so pretty soon the monkeys learn, don't let anyone climb up there. And then one day you get a new monkey that's never been there before, and he starts climbing up, and the other monkeys just pull him back down. And then you start replacing all the old monkeys with entirely new monkeys. And pretty soon you have a population of monkeys that have never been sprayed with water, that have no idea why, but they continue to pull each other down. And I have to tell you that understanding that we are primates, and that is in there, when you're, especially when someone close to you, and I've had it with family, like you can have somebody who gets jealous of your success and jealous of your charisma or whatever it is that, that they're focused on for you. And you have to realize they may not remember, they may never even have been sprayed with the cold water. They may have no idea why they're doing it. It's not even entirely their fault. It's just some misguided instinct. And I tell you, whenever I think that, it switches me from anger to pity. I feel bad for them because they're programmed that way and they didn't break the mold. So I don't know if that helps, but it certainly helps.
It does. Perspective is everything, right? And how you perceive the world is through perspective, and just little tiny perspective switches like that, switching from anger to pity. And that's huge, especially for haters, because the bigger you get, the more the people like you, the more people don't like you. As the old saying goes, you can be the juiciest peach in the world. There's always people that don't like peaches. And I can promise you, man, it comes at a cost, and having that perspective switch is great. And what you said was actually really insightful and helpful. So thanks for sharing that with me.
You're really welcome. Josh, tell me something. People want to watch you on YouTube. They want to find out about your protein powders. They want to find out about your technologies. Where do they find you?
Yeah, so on YouTube, our hunting channel specifically is Bowmar Bow Hunting. I'm very proud to say we have one of the largest hunting channels in the world now, so that's pretty cool. We post a lot of that content and videos of us hunting Africa, deer, conservation. There's a lot of things on there. It's really fun. I just recently posted a video that's really fun to watch, would be the world record crocodile. I shot a 16-foot crocodile, documented the whole thing. You would love this because we documented one of the most rarest breeding rituals ever, and all on video in 4K of a 16-foot plus crocodile breeding a female, doing the whole ritual. It was amazing, really cool footage. And so that's live. In terms of my fitness side of things, we try to keep two different worlds. It's just Josh Bowmar, my name, on the fitness side. Now there is some crossover, but I post a lot of fitness related content over there. A competitive bodybuilder, so I do a lot of that kind of fitness tips and tricks on helping there. And then our companies, Bowmar Archery, Beast Broadheads, which is our main focus right now on scaling that business. We're trying to become the world's largest broadhead company by creating the world's best broadhead. And so that's our goal. And then in terms of products, nutrition wise, Bowmar Nutrition, again, my last name, we get real creative with our company names, Bowmar Archery, Bowmar Bow Hunting, and Bowmar Nutrition. But Bowmar Nutrition, we pride ourselves in making the best tasting protein in the world, along with over 100.
Hold on. I got to push back on that. Look, I don't care how good your protein is. It doesn't taste better than a ribeye.
Okay, you got me there. Nothing beats a good ribeye. You're right. Yeah. I should specify whey protein because nothing beats a ribeye. But we got over 170 different SKUs, everything from helping people lose weight to digestive health, gut microbiomes, great pre-workouts, proteins, the whole shebang. And all of it's really great and third-party tested and all made in the GMP certified facility.
Good job. Well done. We'll make sure to share all the links in the show notes. Josh, it's been a real interesting journey and a privilege having you on the show. And I will keep an eye on your adventures from here on out. And
absolutely.
Thanks again.
Thank you for having me. It was a great podcast. I really enjoyed it.
Well, that's been another great episode of A Wilder Life. And I want to thank you guys all for tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. If you've got any questions or follow-up, just throw it in the comments and let's see what kind of discussion we can simulate. Remember, everybody, stay wild. The difficulties that most of us are facing in life these days are the difficulties of the difference between modern living and natural living. If you can bridge that gap, there's a whole different quality of life out there for you. Thanks very much for being here. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of A Wilder Life. Please leave a review and share it. A Wilder Life with Eric Edmeades.